The first time she called him a freeloader, it was in front of 30 people, and he still smiled like it didn't cut. Ethan Cole stood quietly beside the marble kitchen island, sleeves rolled, fingers still warm from the meal he had just prepared, while his wife laughed lightly into a crystal glass of champagne like she hadn't just stripped him of dignity. "You know how he is," Vanessa said, waving her hand dismissively to her guests. "Doesn't work, doesn't invest, just lives off my success. But at least he cooks well." The room responded with polite laughter, the kind that lingers just long enough to make humiliation feel permanent. Ethan's lips curved faintly, controlled, practiced, but his eyes didn't move. Not toward them, not toward her. He had long mastered the art of standing still while being reduced to nothing. Vanessa Cole, CEO of Vance Global, the fastest-rising luxury retail empire in New York, didn't even glance at him again. She was radiant, powerful, untouchable in her black silk dress, commanding attention like oxygen belonged to her. And Ethan was just there, the quiet husband, the invisible one, the man everyone assumed got lucky. What none of them knew, what she never cared to ask, was that every contract she celebrated tonight had once passed through his hands first. Every investor she praised had taken meetings because of him. Every inch of her empire had been built on decisions he made in silence. But 5 years ago, he signed a contract that mattered more than all of that. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of staying out of her spotlight, 5 years of being nothing. And tonight, standing in the glow of her success, he realized something unsettling. The clock was almost out. Later that night, long after the guests had gone and the echo of laughter still clung to the walls, Ethan stood alone on the balcony as rain began to fall over Manhattan, soft at first, then relentless. Behind him, the glass doors slid open sharply. "You didn't have to stand there like a statue," Vanessa's voice came, cool, irritated rather than apologetic. "It makes people uncomfortable when you act like that." Ethan didn't turn immediately. His fingers tightened slightly around the railing, rain soaking into his shirt as if he didn't feel it. "Does it?" he finally said, voice low, calm in a way that carried something heavier underneath. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Yes, and next time, at least try to look like you belong. You represent me, whether you contribute or not." That was when he turned, slowly, not angry, not loud, just done in a way she didn't recognize. 5 years, Vanessa," he said quietly. "Do you remember what you said the night we signed the contract?" She frowned slightly, already losing interest. "If you have something to say, just say it." Ethan held her gaze now, steady, unflinching, something shifting behind his eyes for the first time in years. "You said at the end of it, we'd decide if this marriage was worth keeping." The rain grew heavier, filling the silence between them. Vanessa exhaled, impatient. "And?" Ethan's voice dropped just enough to make it land. "Tomorrow is the last day." Vanessa blinked once, as if the words hadn't fully registered, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're being dramatic again," she said, turning away from him as if the conversation had already ended in her favor. "It's just a contract, Ethan. We can renew it if necessary." Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she stepped back inside, reaching for her phone, already scrolling, already moving on. But Ethan didn't follow. He remained on the balcony, letting the rain soak through him completely now, his expression unreadable. But something had shifted, something final. For 5 years, he had stayed exactly where she placed him. Tonight, for the first time, he stepped back. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, completely. Inside, Vanessa poured herself another drink,
irritation replacing any trace of curiosity. "Honestly," she muttered under her breath, acting like he has options. Her assistant's message popped up on her screen, reminders for tomorrow's investor signing, the biggest expansion deal of her career, the one that she believed she had fought for alone. She didn't notice that Ethan never came back to bed that night. She didn't notice that his side remained untouched, and she certainly didn't notice when, just before dawn, Ethan walked through the penthouse one last time, not as a husband, but as a man quietly closing a chapter. His gaze lingered on nothing sentimental, no hesitation, no pause, just a calm, unsettling certainty. The contract had an end date, and unlike her, he intended to honor it. Morning came sharp and bright, cutting through the city with ruthless clarity. Vanessa stood in front of her mirror, flawless, composed, already stepping into power mode. By the time she reached the dining area, the table was set, breakfast prepared, coffee steaming exactly how she liked. Routine, predictable, expected. "At least he's useful in the mornings," Vanessa murmured, sitting down without thinking. But something felt off. The silence was different, not the usual quiet obedience. This one felt empty. She glanced toward the hallway. "Ethan." No response. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "Ethan, I don't have time for this." Still nothing. Her patience snapped quicker than her curiosity. She grabbed her coffee, took a sip, and froze. There, under the cup, neatly placed, was a folded document. She frowned, setting the cup down slowly before pulling the paper toward her. The moment she saw the signature at the bottom, something in her chest tightened, just slightly, just enough to be unfamiliar. It was the contract, their marriage contract, but this time it wasn't waiting to be renewed. It was finalized, terminated, completed. Her eyes scanned the last line again slower. "I will not be extending this agreement." For the first time in a long while, Vanessa didn't move immediately. The penthouse, once filled with quiet service and invisible devotion, now felt too still, too clean, too empty. She scoffed lightly, pushing the paper aside as if it meant nothing. "Fine," she said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. She stood, grabbing her bag, forcing the moment out of relevance like everything else that didn't serve her. But as she walked toward the door, something strange followed her. Not regret, not yet, just an unfamiliar discomfort she couldn't name. And somewhere across the city, stepping into a black car that had been waiting long before sunrise, Ethan Cole finally exhaled like a man who had just regained something priceless, his freedom. He didn't look back.
Vanessa didn't think about the paper again for most of the day. She couldn't. The world didn't pause just because Ethan decided to act strange. By midday, she was in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor of Vance Global, surrounded by executives discussing international expansion. Her voice was sharp, controlled, absolute, exactly how she liked it. "I don't care what the projections say," she said, tapping the table once. "We are not negotiating from a place of weakness. We lead, we don't follow." Heads nodded immediately. No one questioned her. No one ever did. That was her power. That was her identity. And yet, every so often, her eyes drifted to the empty chair at the end of the table, an absence she refused to acknowledge as anything important. After the meeting, her assistant followed her into the elevator. "There's something else," the assistant said carefully, holding a tablet. "The household account. It was closed this morning." Vanessa frowned slightly. "Which account?" "Your personal estate account, the one managed under Ethan Cole's authorization." For the first time that day, her expression shifted. Not fear, not worry, just confusion. "That's impossible," she said flatly. "He doesn't manage anything." The assistant hesitated.
Actually, he was the primary authorization signature on several private financial systems tied to your residence, offshore investments, and legacy trust structures. Vanessa let out a short laugh, shaking her head. That's ridiculous. Ethan doesn't even understand corporate finance. But even as she said it, something cold slipped under her certainty, because she had never actually asked. She had never needed to. That evening she returned to the penthouse earlier than usual. The silence hit differently this time. Not peaceful, not normal, hollow. She walked through each room, heels echoing against expensive marble, scanning for something, anything that proved nothing had changed. His jacket was gone. His shoes were gone. Even the small things she never noticed he did, like adjusting the lighting, organizing her scattered files, refilling the kitchen with her favorite things, were absent. She stopped in the center of the living room, suddenly aware of how much of the space had been quietly maintained by someone she never saw. "Ethan?" she called out again, but this time her voice was lower, less commanding, more uncertain. Only silence answered. She walked to the kitchen island where the breakfast had been prepared earlier that morning. The plates were gone now, washed, put away, like he had never been there at all. But then she saw it. Another envelope, placed neatly where his presence used to be. Her name was written in clean, deliberate handwriting. No emotion, no flourish, just finality. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, no dramatic message, no begging, just a list. Bank accounts, asset transfers, private holdings, companies she had never heard of, yet all tied somehow to her empire. At the bottom, one line stood alone. Everything you called yours was built on decisions I made while you weren't looking. Vanessa's breath slowed. For the first time, she didn't have a response ready. And somewhere deep inside the city, beyond glass towers and noise and power she thought she owned, Ethan Cole stepped into a building that had never once appeared in her world, and the doors opened for him like they had been waiting 5 years to do so. Vanessa stared at the document long after she finished reading it, as if staring harder would make the words rearrange into something less impossible. The city outside her penthouse window kept moving, lights flickering, traffic flowing, life continuing as if nothing had changed. But inside her, something unfamiliar had begun to crack. "This doesn't make sense," she said aloud, voice sharper than her thoughts. "He doesn't have access to any of this." Yet even as she said it, her certainty felt thinner than it had ever been. She grabbed her phone, dialing her CFO immediately. "Run a full audit on every external dependency tied to Vance Global, now." Her tone left no room for questions. But the response she got 10 minutes later did something she didn't expect. It slowed her breathing. "Ma'am, there are embedded authorization layers in our international subsidiaries," the CFO said carefully. "They don't originate from your board structure." Vanessa's grip tightened. "Then where do they originate from?" A pause, long enough to feel intentional. "We can't trace the original architect, but the signature protocol, it matches a private entity known only as C. Cole Holdings." Vanessa frowned. "Cole," she repeated. Her mind immediately went to Ethan, but she dismissed it just as quickly. Impossible. Ethan Cole didn't build empires. He didn't invest. He didn't strategize multi-billion-dollar frameworks behind global corporations. He cooked breakfast. He stood quietly at parties. He existed in the background of her success, like furniture she occasionally acknowledged. That was his role. That was all he was supposed to be. And yet, that night, as she sat alone in her office long after the building had emptied, she found herself replaying every moment she had ever dismissed him. The way he never asked for money, the way he never seemed impressed by her deals, the way he always knew things before her advisors did, but never spoke unless spoken to. She stood suddenly, pacing toward the glass wall overlooking Manhattan. "No," she whispered to herself. "No, that's not possible." But her voice didn't sound convinced anymore. At the same time, across the city, Ethan walked through a private corridor beneath a building that had no public name. There were no logos, no announcements, no recognition, just silence and precision. Doors opened as he passed, staff lowering their heads instinctively, not out of fear, out of recognition. He didn't slow down until he reached the top floor, where a boardroom stretched out in glass and steel, filled with executives who had been waiting since dawn. When he entered, the room stood immediately. No hesitation, no introductions needed. "Report," he said calmly, taking his seat at the head of the table. A man across from him slid a tablet forward. "Vance Global is fully aligned under your contingency structure. All 5-year clauses have now expired." Ethan didn't react at first. He simply looked at the city beyond the glass, at the empire she thought she owned. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he said, "And she just found out she never did." Behind him, the screen lit up with Vanessa's name across every asset, every company, every hidden layer she had never known existed. And for the first time in 5 years, the silence between them was no longer equal.
Vanessa didn't sleep that night. She told herself it was irritation, business pressure, a glitch in her systems, anything but what it actually was. Uncertainty. She sat in her office until the sky over Manhattan faded from black to gray, staring at the same audit report until the words blurred together. C. Cole Holdings. The name looped in her head like a warning she couldn't decode. By morning, she had already made her decision. "Find him," she said sharply to her head of security the moment she stepped into Vance Global's executive floor. "I don't care how. I want Ethan Cole's location within the hour." The man hesitated. "Ma'am, there's no registered financial activity under his name. No credit movements, no travel records since yesterday. It's as if what?" she snapped. "It's as if he doesn't exist in the system anymore." That answer should have been impossible, but it wasn't the impossibility that unsettled her. It was how clean it sounded, like someone had erased him on purpose. For the first time, Vanessa didn't sit when she entered her office. She paced instead, phone tight in her hand, jaw clenched. "He's playing a game," she muttered. "He thinks this will make me chase him." But even as she said it, her confidence didn't land the way it used to, because Ethan had never played games with her before. He had never needed attention. He had never needed anything. And now he was gone. Across the city, in a high-level meeting room overlooking Central Park, Ethan sat at the same head seat again, calm, composed, unreadable. The city beneath him looked smaller from here, manageable, controlled. A senior executive slid a file forward. "We've finalized the final integration phase. Vance Global is now fully stabilized under your structural oversight. All subsidiaries are aligned. She still believes she is in control of the expansion board." A faint pause. "And her?" one of the board members asked carefully. Ethan's eyes didn't move from the glass wall. Somewhere out there, he knew she was waking up to the first cracks in a reality she built without understanding its foundation. "She'll realize it soon," he said, not cruel, not angry, just certain. Back at Vance Global, Vanessa finally did something she hadn't done in years. She searched his name manually. Not in her corporate systems, not through assistants, not through filters, just
Ethan Cole. The results that appeared made her pause. No social presence, no professional history, no verified background. Only one faint, buried trace, a 5-year-old legal filing tied to a private marriage contract, signed under sealed terms she had never bothered to read past the first page. Her fingers slowed, because at the bottom of the document, barely visible unless zoomed in, was a second signature block she had never noticed before. Corporate authorization tier, executive override. And the name beside it wasn't hers. It was his. Her phone slipped slightly in her grip as the realization didn't arrive all at once, but in pieces. Ethan hadn't just been in her life. He had been underneath it. And somewhere deep inside the system she trusted more than people, something just changed ownership. Her screen flickered once, then a new notification appeared. Board access updated, and the listed administrator name was Ethan Cole.